If you're going out to be a grip or an electric, you know, you go work on the Avengers. Well, they're hiring 100 grips and they're hiring 2 writers.
We had this comment come in the other day under one of our videos, and it's the thing that no older, quote, successful artist understands is that just make it is not an option when you are a young artist and have to work in a cafe part-time to survive.
You know, I feel like there's a lot of people that give that advice. Just go out and make it. Go out and make your thing. And it's definitely a blessing and a curse. You know, if you go out with your friends and you make something that is absolutely atrocious, that everyone thinks is funny, but then you show it to someone else and they're kind of like, well, you can't show anybody this. This is terrible. It'll make you look bad. You don't want to do that at the beginning, especially at the beginning. And I had that situation happen with one of our projects where we did a whole proof of concept and spent a lot of money and did a lot of time and energy and work, and we did it the best we possibly could. And then we showed it to some bigger people and they were like, well, this is bad. You can't show anyone this. And it was like, oh, okay. And we had to pull it. You know, we had to recut it and tighten it up and not show it to anyone because they were like, this is detrimental to your career. If you're looking to build a career off of this isn't going to help you out. And so at some point you have to understand that too, that if you do run into that situation, then you make a decision. But I mean, everything comes down to marketing. You can release a movie and not do any marketing, and the movie exists, but no one's seen it. So they're probably not going to have watched it anyway. When you have it on your resume or you have it on your IMDb, it's like, oh yeah, you made all these movies. I haven't seen them, but that's cool that you made those movies. Because if you're not marketing it and getting the word out, then no one's going to watch it anyway, especially. So I think that it changes too. Nowadays, it's gotten so much cheaper and easier to make higher quality content. I mean, you look at, you know, a professional camera package you can probably get for under 10 grand now, whereas 20 years ago it would have been 200 grand. So you can make good quality stuff nowadays easier, but everything has to be good quality to make this ultimate movie that's really going to impress people to launch you to that next level. And I think a lot of people don't have the ability to do that. I mean, I have friends in town that they were like, oh, you have cameras and lights and sound? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got everything. And they're like, oh wow, because I always wanted to make this video, but I have no way of doing it. And it's like, well, you find somebody else that does have it, and hopefully at some point, this is one of the good benefits of film schools. I'm not a firm believer in film schools, but you want to find your crew, you want to find your tribe. And if there's a way to build that, a film school is the best way to do that. The school itself is going to do whatever, but it's finding those other people that are like-minded that maybe have equipment, and you try to build that up. And then especially now with social media, finding other people nearby you is a lot easier, and seeing who has a camera, who has lights, who's an actor, and then trying to put something together that hopefully isn't horrible. Or you start doing horrible things and say, okay, well, this was fun, but now let's do something better. Because every time you do it, it's only going to get better and better and better, hopefully. And if it's not, then maybe you should look into a different career, because it might not be for you.
Well, and if you didn't go to a film school, you can still find your, quote, tribe, but I think it would take a little bit longer. But I mean, you can meet fantastic people on Craigslist. You can meet also some scary people on Craigslist. But, you know, or you could find people on Mandy or whatever, and it might just take longer to piece together reliable people that you have the same personality type. You can work well together, you know.
And I think it's definitely a stigma in the industry, which I don't disagree with nowadays, where it's kind of like, hey, looking for a crew to make this movie, paying you in lunch and IMDb credit. And it's kind of like, you know, if I was 20, I would have been like, that's awesome. I want to totally jump on that guy's team and do this. But at 40, I'm kind of like, all right, well, what are you doing, kid? Like, you know, you need to pay those people because they have rent and families. And so it's definitely become a problem to where our industry also doesn't really put the value in what exactly we're bringing to the table. Because I think so many people don't understand it. I always compare it to when I go get my car fixed. I have no idea how to fix a car. I don't know where anything. I barely can put the gasoline in, let alone know what the engine does. So it's like, those guys are like, well, I work for $80 an hour. And it's like, okay, here's your $80 an hour. Go fix my car, because I have no idea what you're doing. But then when someone comes to a filmmaker or a camera operator, someone is like, oh yeah, I work for $80 an hour. And they're like, what are you talking about? All you do is press a button. And like, there's a strange mentality around the industry about that devalues what exactly we do. And you watch these big movies, and there's 1,000 people's names in the credits. It's like every single one of these people had to do something to pull off this thing you just watched for 2 hours in your living room. So that stigma is unfortunate, because the devaluing of everything and telling film school kids, well, go out and work for free for the first 10 years. And it's like, well, how do you do that? Like that's, you kind of need to pay your bills and survive. But then you have to get better. And it's always a cart before the horse story. It's like, how do you get better if you're not doing it? But then people say, just go do it. And there's plenty of stories that someone is successful from just doing it, for sure, but it's a needle in a haystack, and that's going to happen a handful of times a year with 10,000 people trying. But I mean, a lot of this industry is luck and talent. I mean, I like to think that everyone has talent. Everyone's talented in the industry. So if you start off at a sea of 1,000 people and every single one of them's talented and 3 people are going to get caught to move on, then it's luck. You know, it's really luck and networking, like getting as many people to know you exist as humanly possible is like the real key to the whole industry, because you're literally just floundering in a sea of thousands trying to have someone be like, hey, I'm really talented. And it's like, well, yeah, you're really talented. That guy's talented. That girl's talented. Everybody's talented. Everyone's good. Especially here in Los Angeles, it's like they've made the jump. They're here. They're strong. They're ready to fight for what they want. So it's definitely, there's definitely a lot of different schools of thought around it. And it's trying to figure out what works best for you in your situation is really the challenging one. Hopefully your grandparents are the neighbor to someone really famous and they can just make a phone call and give you a career. Like that's the easy way to do it.
Well, even with that, though, they've still got to show up and they still have to perform in some way. So connections, I think, do help. I've never had any, but I have seen people who have, and it doesn't always guarantee them a job. They still have to, you know, and sometimes, and I know people are going to fight me on this, when things are too comfortable for certain people for too long, I think there's a lack of willingness to try. And that's what my next question was, that with certain institutions, and you say they advocate just, you know, working for free or doing different things, is that a very textbook response for people that have the money to go to them? Community colleges, I don't think they would probably give that advice, but maybe they would. I don't know.
I mean, I think I would feel that, and this is across the board with all industries. I mean, internships out of college or during college is pretty consistent, which is free labor. It's like you're working free labor in the industry of your choice to gain more real world experience. And that happens everywhere. That happens with doctors. That happens with, I mean, almost any industry. You still go and do a residency. You still have to go do internships with corporations to try to get into those positions you want, because you have to prove yourself that you're talented and qualified to be able to move up in the world. And that, so I do agree that it's the same way in film. It's like if you're in college and you're trying to get more experience. I mean, I internship when I was in high school and some during college, and I got great experience and I met lots of new people and it definitely helped me out. But it's more so you're going to be working for free for 10 years, or the expectation that everyone else should work for free for 10 years. That's where it gets frustrating, because everyone's creative and everyone wants to do stuff, and it's a lot of fun to do things, and it's awesome. I mean, if I could be on set every day, I would, but at a certain point, you have to kind of decide, like, okay, now I'm working beyond my worth. Like, I need to actually make money and I need to survive and I need to support my family. And so you have to figure out what's the best way to do that. But I think that internships is a very common rule across the board of any occupation.
And it's advised from any college?
Yeah.
Whether like a prestigious 4-year or a local community college, which could have just as great of a teacher. It could be the same teacher, actually.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, some schools offer placement. Some schools have great reputations for getting people jobs out of college. And so it all kind of depends. I mean, in the writing, directing world, those are the 2 hardest jobs to get in the industry. If you're going out to be a grip or an electric, you know, you go work on the Avengers. Well, they're hiring 100 grips and they're hiring 2 writers for one movie. So it's like there's lots of other opportunities. You get into a below the line position, you're a production assistant or makeup or, you know, G&E. There's a ton more work because they hire so many more of those jobs. And I have friends that just went into those and they're like, oh, they're booked for years because there's so much opportunity there. But for someone that wants to be a little more creative, that focuses on writing and directing or something, there's way less of those jobs. And I remember in 2009, I did a short film that got a lot of acclaim called 222. It was a graphic horror short, and we were getting calls from all over the place. Like New Line Cinema called up, and I was in Florida being like, oh crap, like we made a good short. Oh no, what do we do now? And I remember meeting with a management firm here, and we had a whole meeting, and they were like, well, what do you want to do with it? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, why'd you make the short? I was like, well, I wanted a calling card to show what my abilities were, to try to raise more awareness. And they're like, oh, you don't want to turn this into a movie? And I'm like, I mean, we could turn it into a movie. They're like, oh, you don't have a script ready to go? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, all right, well, thanks for coming by, da, da, da. And I was like, wait, what happened? I didn't get this lesson. And I remember talking to one of the managers, and I was like, okay, so you're not going to sign me, but can I ask why? Like, I'm curious. This is all new to me. And he was like, look, we represent Joel Schumacher. This is back in 2009. We represent Joel Schumacher. We send him into meetings to try to get directing jobs. So when it's you and Joel Schumacher, in a meeting, or they have to decide between the two of you, who do you think they're going to choose? And I'm like, oh, well, Joel Schumacher, obviously. And they're like, yeah, that's the problem, is that we can't put you next to Joel Schumacher yet. Like, you need to do something big enough to be like, oh, this guy just did this. Oh, okay, that's who that is. And so it's the same kind of a thing. Like, you're constantly proving yourself all the way up the ladder. Even though, I mean, I've pitched to a dozen major studios in town now, I haven't gotten any yeses yet, but I've got open door policies, and I'm in there and working the game and everything. And so it's exciting just to be part of the system and figure out how the mechanisms work and everything. But until something happens, or I get a lucky break or something that breaks you out of that, it's a lot more challenging for sure.
And now, do you have answers ready for their questions? Like the magical, what else do you have?
Oh, every single project I do for a very specific purpose, especially shorts. If you make a short film, there's usually 3 reasons you make a short film. 1 is to do something fun with your friends. 2 is to take it to film festivals and try to win awards. Or 3, use it to try to make a feature, to try to get, to raise enough awareness and show your capabilities at a 0 budget or low budget, that way you could do on a feature level. So I feel like every project should be like that at this point, that you make a project for a very specific reason. I mean, every now and then you get a for-hire job. Like, there's a new short that I just signed on to that's just a directing for hire, and it's a company that wants us to do this for them. And I'm like, sure, we can totally produce your content as well. But I think you need to have a plan, because if you do catch that lightning in a bottle, you need to know what to do with it. And I was definitely, I'm really curious, if I had everything prepared back then, what would have happened? Because now when I make a script, I do a full breakdown, I do concept art, I do a poster art for every single project I'm pitching. So it's like, here's this. There's one that I'm really in love with, and I did a full brand package. We developed a comic book and a video game app and everything. It's like, look, this is the whole brand, this is the marketing, this is how we would do it. And then you shop it that way, which is a lot better than, oh, I've got an idea, or I've got a script, and that's it. You kind of, at this point, need to do a little bit more legwork to be able to showcase what you can do. And some people do hypercut trailers. You go make a trailer with a bunch of other footage to be like, this is the feel that we're going for, kind of a thing, or concept art or whatnot. But yeah, it's a challenge no matter what. It's all an uphill battle. So the more you're prepared for it, the better.